Good morning, everybody. Just want to make sure, JD, first of all, that you can hear us and we can hear you.
I got you loud and clear, Jeff. Thanks.
Thanks. So, ladies and gentlemen, today is the final time you will see Colonel John Dorrian on the screen. He is going to be redeploying soon and coming home. So, JD, thank you for doing this on your last brief before you come home. And we'll turn it over to you for some opening comments.
Very good. Good morning, all. The Syrian Democratic Forces and the Syrian Arab Coalition have successfully liberated the vast majority of Tabqa, and they continue to clear ISIS remnants from the final two neighborhoods of the city, to include completely cutting off the Tabqa Dam from the rest of the city, isolating the remaining fighters there. This is key infrastructure the Syrian people rely on for electric power. Tabqa is an extremely dangerous battle zone. As they advance, SDF forces encounter ISIS snipers who are using apartment buildings, hospitals, and mosques in the dense urban terrain to mask their positions. Our partners continue finding and clearing improvised explosive devices in liberated territory. As we've seen before, ISIS fighters emplace these booby traps in any area they control. Unfortunately, after they are defeated, these become explosive remnants of war that hurt a lot of people and delay residents from resuming their normal lives. Once the enemy is defeated, removal of these explosives becomes a high priority. Even as ISIS is completely isolated and ultimately eliminated from Tabqa, their tactics continue to create incalculable human suffering. About 30,000 Tabqa residents have been displaced from their homes since the battle started in late March. Protecting the safety and well-being of Syrian civilians who remain in the city remains an important priority for our partner force. After Tabqa is completely liberated, the Syrian Democratic Forces and Syrian Arab Coalition and coalition forces will continue operations to isolate and seize Raqqa. In Raqqa this week, coalition strikes have destroyed a number of ISIS boats and barges, including 13 on Monday alone, as well as heavy construction equipment that ISIS is using to build berms and barriers to try and complicate operations for our partner forces as they liberate the city. As always, when we see these enemy gatherings and using these kind of resources to counter our partners, those resources will be removed from the picture as expeditiously as possible through coalition strikes. We have also observed ISIS sabotaging infrastructure by blocking river flow to create temporary earthen dams, creating flooding intended to slow our partners' advance in the countryside around Raqqa to both the east and the west. The coalition is assisted by striking some of these and the heavy equipment that the enemy has used to build these earthen dams, restoring normal water flow and eliminating the obstacle. Moving to Iraq, Iraqi security forces have continued advancing in West Mosul after the 9th Iraqi Armored Division and Iraqi Federal Police started a new axis of advance in northwest Mosul last week. We've also seen the Iraqi Counterterrorism Service accelerate their advances into the industrial section of the West Mosul. As the ISF advance, they continue encountering tough resistance from enemy snipers, enemy vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices, and human shields. We hear reports about these enemy tactics nearly every day from Iraqis who are fleeing the fighting. The multi-axis advance of the ISF have presented the enemy with more dilemmas than they can react to, and this is manifesting itself in liberated neighborhoods and relieved Moslawis who are quite satisfied to no longer be under the control of a barbaric terrorist group. This week alone, the ISF have liberated more than 30 square kilometers of terrain in the west side of Mosul. It's very difficult to predict exactly how long the liberation of Mosul is going to take, but we are seeing the enemy's defenses degraded with each passing day. And with that, I will be delighted to answer your questions.
Michael Gordon from the New York Times.
JD, two questions. Have you started the process of arming the Syrian Kurds and providing additional weapons to the Syrian Arabs? And will the Syrian Arab coalition and the Kurdish elements be receiving the same weapons? And I have a follow-up question.
Michael, some of the equipment and the resources that are going to be provided are already in theater, and some of those may have begun being dispersed, very, very quickly. But really, the decision that was made yesterday is authorities. So this will be an ongoing effort, and what we can expect to see is that this equipment and the resources that are going to be made available to the entire SDF will be metered out, specifically aligned with various tasks that they are trying to accomplish to isolate and then go into Raqqa. So some of the material that are have been slated to provide these resources to our partner force are there already and will be distributed soon, and some will be metered out as it's needed. With regard to the Kurdish elements and the Syrian Arab coalition elements, we expect those to be provided the same resources that we have been providing all along.
My follow-up question, please, is the Russians have announced de-escalation zones, 4 de-escalation zones in Syria, and made various assertions that the U.S. and the coalition should not fly over these zones. Are you continuing to fly over these areas? Will you honor this Russian admonition, or will you ignore it and just go wherever you think you need to be in Syrian airspace?
Yeah, Michael, we continue to use our deconfliction channel to communicate with Russia what our intent is. I can tell you that the areas that are slated to be a part of these zones are not really affiliated very closely with areas where we are historically striking ISIS. So to some degree, it's not really a coalition issue to some extent. So we'll continue deconflicting and taking the actions that we need to in order to strike ISIS anywhere on the battlefield where their fighters and their resources can be found. But this has not been something that has been a significant issue thus far.
Okay, next to Lori Milroy from Kurdistan 24.
If I could follow up on Michael's last question, I have another one then. Do you accept in principle that the Russians can just tell you you can't fly here and you can't fly there? Is that acceptable in principle?
Yeah, what you're talking about is more of an overall diplomatic discussion, and we are really focused on the operational fight. What we have done is we continue to deconflict our operations with the Russians, and we've not found that with clear communication going both ways that we've had really serious problems. It's a really important thing that we maintain doing that because this is what's enabled safe operations with each entity that is fighting ISIS to continue conducting their operations, but in a manner that prevents miscalculation and any type of security mishap.
And thank you. And my other question, could you give us some idea of the new kinds of weapons that you will be providing to the SDF under the authority that was announced yesterday?
So what we're talking about here is small arms, ammunition, and the types of weapons that can be used to address the types of threats that we've seen the ISIS enemy use. So vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices and that sort of thing. So heavy machine guns, that types of capability.
Those mortars?
Yeah, mortars will be included, yes.
Okay, next to Rajib from the Daily Sabah.
Hello, Colmo. Thanks for doing this. Do you think these weapons or arms or ammunition that will be provided to the Kurdish component of SDF will be US made or another kind of country made weapons?
Well, as far as the specifics of exactly what brand of weapon will be used, I think we'll keep it at small arms, and we're not really going to go into a lot of specificity with exactly what's being provided. Doing so compromises operational security, so we don't really want ISIS to have tremendous insight into exactly what resources and weapons will be provided to our partner force. What I can tell you, though, is that all of these items are going to be metered out to accomplish specific objectives for the isolation and liberation of Raqqa. And we're going to carefully monitor what's being provided and what it's used for. And we are completely committed to make sure that it's being used for exactly the purpose that we intend.
Another question, are you going to provide anti-tank missiles like TOW, T-O-W?
Yep. I couldn't hear what you said. I'm sorry. Can you please repeat?
Are you going to provide weapons such as anti-tank missiles like TOW, TOW missiles?
We're going to provide weapons that are capable of defeating vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices of the type that we have seen throughout the campaign. So the enemy builds on a regular vehicle, they up-armor it with a lot of elaborate armor plating. It's very difficult to defeat with a rifle alone, so you need something with a little more capabilities, some heavy machine guns and other capabilities that can address that level of threat. So I'm not going to go into further specifics on that, but I will tell you that every single one of these weapons that are being provided to our partner force, we intend to account for them and to ensure that they are pointed at ISIS.
Next to Jamie McIntyre, Washington Examiner.
Colonel, can you update us on what is the state of encirclement or isolation of Raqqa at this point? And a second question, at this point, does the operation to liberate Raqqa have any Turkish component? Has any role been carved out for Turkey at this point?
Thanks, Jamie. With regard to the isolation of Raqqa, with the completion of operations at Tabqa, the city will be almost completely isolated to the north, to the west, and to the east. It's very important to finish the seizure of Tabqa and Tabqa Dam. As you know, Tabqa Dam is the largest dam in Syria and is a source of electric power, including to Raqqa. So we really want to assist our partner force in getting that under control. This was an important area for facilitation of ISIS fighters in Raqqa. They used it for supply, command and control, and to reinforce their fighters in Raqqa. So it's good that the Syrian Democratic Forces and Syrian Arab Coalition are making good progress in retaking that terrain. We also have partner forces south of Raqqa that are there to help interdict any ISIS fighters who try to move south. So, the city is almost completely isolated, and what we can expect is that our partner forces will continue moving closer to the city to advance to within striking distance. In the meantime, the coalition will continue to conduct airstrikes and then artillery strikes in the areas where our partners are active. We'll continue to conduct airstrikes anywhere in Syria where ISIS fighters and resources can be found, including Raqqa. What we've seen most recently from the enemy is that they're building a lot of elaborate defenses in Raqqa. And so we're removing a lot of construction equipment and reducing the enemy's ability to build those defenses. But they've had nearly 3 years, so there's already a lot there. We'll do what we can to uncomplicate the situation for our partner forces. They advance and retake that city. As far as a Turkish role for what will happen in Raqqa, we continue talking to Turkey every single day. There are Turkish officers in the headquarters of CJTF-OIR who are working every day to defeat ISIS in Iraq and Syria. I think it would be best not to speculate about what other future roles there may be. I know there's a lot of diplomatic discussion well above my level, and we'll just have to let that play out.
One quick follow-up question. Can you tell us at all how many ISIS fighters or leaders have actually left Raqqa at this point, where they seem to have congregated? Do you have an idea of where they've gone and what strength they might be?
As far as numbers and exactly who, we don't really have that I could offer you in this forum. What I would say is we have observed ISIS leaders leaving Raqqa, some of them, but there are still a substantial number who are in the city. Just to remind, this is their self-proclaimed capital, and they are not going to give it up easily. They're going to stay and fight, and many of them are going to be killed there. There are some, and what we've seen throughout the campaign is that when ISIS leaders understand that they are about to lose terrain or lose a key area, they often move their families out, and then some of the key leaders move out, and they leave orders for their fighters or lower level commanders to stay in place and fight and die in place. And they do that in a manner that's very directive, and they punish those who don't follow that order. They have been known to execute their fighters who leave after being directed to stand and fight and die. And that is something that we're still seeing throughout the areas that ISIS is losing in, including Mosul.
Okay, next to Kasim Ileri from Anadolu News Agency.
Thank you very much, Colin. Most of my questions I actually have been covered, but can you tell us how soon, as you have started to deliver arms to the SDF partners, how soon the Raqqa liberation or liberating operation will start?
Mm-hmm. Well, we do believe that the delivery of these capabilities will accelerate and enable the campaign to go in and seize Raqqa. As you know, the enemy has built elaborate defenses there, similar to what we've seen in Mosul. And this is going to take a tremendous effort and a lot of concerted cooperation between the coalition and our partner force in order for them to be successful in Raqqa. I can't put an exact timeline on it. I think we'll in the interest of operational security, we want to let the enemy worry about when our partner forces are going to start. But in the meantime, the coalition will continue hammering the enemy anywhere that they can be found as preparatory fires and shaping efforts to help pave the way for the liberation of the city.
Is there a number, a bulk number that you can give us about the SDF forces that are going to benefit from those arms that you are providing?
You know, I really don't have the exact number because doing so, we've not shared the exact number of fighters that are going to go into Raqqa and liberate the city. So I don't have that. What I would say is that the majority of the fighters that are operating in the isolation effort are Syrian Arabs, and we'll continue to focus on arming them. And we've just added the additional element of the Kurdish elements. So the Arab fighters that are there have to isolate the city, and that's something that we expect to continue as the liberation battle ensues.
Okay, thanks. We'll go to Idris Ali from Reuters.
Just a quick follow-up. Resources have begun being dispersed very quickly. So have they started being dispersed, or will they be dispersed soon? To the YPG specifically.
Yeah, I don't have that level of fidelity on exactly when these capabilities are going to be put into the hands of the Kurdish elements. What I would tell you is that you know, we've got a certain amount of supply in the country already that was used to equip the Syrian Arab coalition, and some of that may be distributed very quickly, but I don't have a by-the-minute progress report on what's been put in which group's hands, when, and where.
But has anything moved so far?
That business. I'm sorry, Idris, can you repeat the question?
Anything moved to the YPG so far since the announcement yesterday?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if anything's been put in their hands. What I would tell you is that yesterday's decision was to grant authorities, and the intent in that decision was to assure that the capabilities that are going to be provided would be metered out consistent with various objectives in the campaign. So it'll be given out on an as-needed basis. We'll continue focusing on the Syrian Arab element, but we intend to add the Kurdish element as well.
Next, Ryan Brown, CNN.
Hello, Colonel. Thank you for doing this with one last time for us. I had a question about what you just said. In terms of, we keep hearing that the arms and equipment to the Kurds will be metered out on an objective-by-objective basis. Does that mean these weapons would be reclaimed once that objective is completed?
No, that means that they will expend these resources fighting ISIS, and ISIS will pay the price for their capabilities being available to our partner force.
Great, and thank you for that. And just one other question. I understand the original statement, it talked about, the vetting has remained unchanged, and all, in terms of assistance, now that these Kurdish groups are being included in the arming and equipping, will there be any additional vetting that needs to occur, or are they considered already appropriately vetted to receive arms?
Yeah, one of the fundamental principles that we operate by is that we resource only entities that can be vetted, that are not going to be involved in human rights abuses, that are going to follow the laws of armed conflict. So that has been done with any element that is receiving these capabilities and resources. If there are additional people that are, we're vetting people all the time, and then of course we continue to monitor what our partnered forces do during the campaign, and if there's any type of departure from those fundamental principles, then that certainly would be something that would curtail what we do from then forward.
Thank you, sir.
All right, next, Richard Sisk with military.com.
Hi, Colonel. Can you say whether U.S. forces are still continuing to go up to the Turkish-Syria border, where there had been some clashes between the YPG, cross-border firing? Are U.S. forces still providing a visible presence up there?
Yep, thanks, Richard. The thing about those forces that were patrolling up there, there was really nothing new about what they were doing. We had done that intermittently throughout the campaign, and we will continue to do it intermittently throughout the campaign. So we're not really going to announce how often we're doing it. We're not going to announce when we stop doing it, but it is something that will be done on an as-needed basis. But one of the things that's very important to understand here is that as many of our forces as we can, and as many of our partnered forces as we can, and as many NATO coalition partners as we can, we want to keep focused on fighting ISIS, because they are the biggest threat to Iraq and Syria, and they are a big threat to the region, and then the big threat for international terrorism. So the whole purpose of those patrols, when we were doing them, is to keep everyone focused on fighting ISIS. So that's something that was done and will be done by exception.
And Colonel, thanks, many thanks for your patience and professionalism over this past year.
Thank you.
Hey, sir, I just have a quick one. With all the movement on the battlefield and all the fighting and everything in recent weeks and months, is it fair right now, today, to say that Raqqa is the largest concentration of ISIS fighters? I'm trying to understand, what's left in Mosul and any movement down the the river there and everything. Is there anywhere else where there's a massive amount of ISIS fighters at this point?
It's safe to say that Raqqa is the major objective. That is the focus. That is where the largest concentration of fighters, well, the largest number of fighters remain, I would say. In West Mosul, they're very concentrated in a very small area, but that concentration gets less with each passing day. So in Raqqa, that is the largest number that you find in any city or town or village anywhere in Iraq or Syria. We do see significant numbers of fighters elsewhere along the Euphrates River Valley, and you do see in Iraq significant numbers of fighters in places like Hawija, Tal Afar, and Beij. So those are areas that will be cleared out later. We'll continue working with our partner forces and we'll defeat ISIS in those places too.
Okay, David Martin, CBS News.
Now, just to be clear on Tabqa, you said that the city is mostly liberated, but the dam remains in under the control of ISIS. Is that correct? And is there any sign that ISIS is preparing to sabotage the dam?
David, it's correct to say that the overwhelming preponderance of Tabqa city has been liberated. There are still some areas where the last I heard the enemy was still doing some clearing operations. They had, however, cut off ISIS from the city at Tabqa Dam. We don't have any indications at this point that they have any plan to sabotage the dam, but they are heavily barricaded in there, and these are some of the most troubling elements of ISIS in that area, the foreign fighters, and so it's going to be a very difficult battle to liberate the dam.
And the second question, since yesterday's announcement on arming the Kurds, has there been any change in the mill-to-mill relations between Turkey and the coalition? Any restrictions on operations at Incirlik? Any meetings canceled or not attended?
David, I'm not aware of any changes. That's as of this afternoon. So I'm not aware of any changes. Both the coalition, the U.S., Turkey, have all expressed commitment to defeating ISIS, and we believe we're completely on the same page with the necessity of doing that, because ISIS threatens every nation. They threaten every nation in the region. They threaten Europe, and they threaten the world. So we're going to keep working closely with Turkey. We very much value their security, and ISIS threatens them, as has the PKK, which the U.S. has recognized as a terrorist organization for right about 20 years now. So we're going to stay focused on working with them to defeat ISIS.
Okay, a couple of follow-ups. Lori Milroy from Kurdistan 24.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned earlier that there were partnered forces south of Raqqa that were catching any ISIS moving to the south. Are those also SDF, or are they some other partnered force?
No, those are vetted Syrian opposition. Those are Syrian Arabs who recognize that ISIS poses a threat to the entire country, and they don't want to live under ISIS control. So there are more elements than just the SDF and Syrian Arab coalition that have major problems with ISIS, and whenever we find groups that are willing to follow the principles that we believe are essential to defeating ISIS, which is LOAC, following the laws of armed conflict, and not conducting human rights abuses, we're going to try to identify and work with those partners.
So are you continuing to develop partnered forces in Syria for this fight? Is that something ongoing?
Absolutely. That also is a fundamental principle of the campaign. We have trained forces even after as we work with partner forces to liberate areas that are under ISIS control. For example, in Iraq, we've trained more than 97,000 forces. There are thousands of forces in training now. We've begun refocusing the effort from training Army elements to increase the amount of police forces that we believe will be essential as ISIS continues losing territory. They'll devolve into a terror-type insurgent threat, and police forces are a key element in defeating that threat.
Very much.
Yes, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick follow. The equipment, the weapons that are going to be distributed to the Kurdish elements and the SAC will require some training, presumably on the part of the U.S. How much training do you envision will be needed to get them to operate mortars or anti-tank or vehicles? Are we just talking about a matter of days? Who's going to do the training, and where are you going to do it? And has that begun?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. We have trained a significant number of forces throughout the campaign. So this was conducted by our Special Operations Forces working with the Syrian Arab Coalition. There probably will be some additional training efforts, but I don't have the level of detail that you're asking for. I think that's something we're going to have to take and probably get you a little more detailed answer as a follow-up.
Okay, and Qasim, I think you had a follow-up as well.
A follow-up question to Ryan's questions. You said that those arms are not going to be reclaimed, Colonel. Can you tell us what will happen to those significant arms after the defeat of ISIS or the missions are completed?
Yep. Thank you for that. Those weapons are going to be expended and used in order to defeat ISIS. So one of the things that's important to understand here is if you're talking about rifles and these types of weapons, the availability of ammunition is also a limiting factor. So as these things are expanded, they're metered out for specific purposes. There's a natural limitation on what can be done once those supplies are expended. So that is one of the limits on what will happen with all these weapons later.
So then how would you ensure that those arms at some point would not turn to partner forces or opposition groups or any other partner country?
Well, it's not just the metering of the capabilities that's a limitation here. We are observing what's going on with these weapons. We're making sure that they're used for the purpose that they're being given. We have made sure that those who are receiving these weapons pledge to use them against ISIS, and we're going to be watching to make sure that that's how they're used. So I won't get into a speculative discussion about what we may do, although I will say that certainly any departure from what's been agreed will affect how we operate with partner forces going forward. That's just a fundamental principle here, and it's one that we've followed with every force that we work with.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? So, John, we just wanted to say thank you. It was a year ago, I think you were sitting in Colorado Springs at Air Force Space Command, and you volunteered, raised your hand, and agreed to go off to this very challenging and important job. And it was something you've done, a great sacrifice to your own life and your own family. But we wanted to thank you for it. Your weekly updates have been very valuable. Your updates to us, your updates with the Iraqi press, your updates with the international press and the press corps there in Baghdad have helped to ensure that we have an informed public when it comes to understanding this important campaign to defeat ISIS, and you have done that. So on behalf of the Secretary, on behalf of our Assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs, past and present, Dana White and Peter Cook before her, and all the team here and the press corps, we want to thank you for your service in doing this. We look forward to seeing Ryan Dillon here in the coming weeks, and we wish you Godspeed and best of luck as you return home to your family in Colorado. We'll turn it over to you.
Jeff, I want to thank you for the kind word, and I want to thank all of our friends in the Pentagon press for being patient with me, even for the times that you weren't patient with me, because I'm a firm believer in the importance of being as transparent as we can, explaining what's going on with the campaign. People need to understand how important what's happening here in Iraq and Syria is to our national security, and it's been a true privilege to be the person to help with that. I have been working closely with my esteemed colleague, Ryan Dillon, who is eager to get started next week. I'm going to remain here for several more days to be a resource to him as he transitions in. What I would ask is you continue to challenge him and have him explain what we're doing accurately in context. That's what we're going for. And I also want to thank all my partners and friends at OSD, at CENTCOM, and then special thanks to my esteemed colleague and battle buddy, Joe Skoraka. Many of the answers that I have been privileged to give to you, frankly, those answers a lot of the time come from our headquarters. So Joe Skoraka and the entire team down at Arif John, they've just been incredible. So I wish you all the best. I'm not going to be a person who melts away, and I look forward to working with all of you and seeing you around again.
You've done a great job for an Air Force guy, and we look forward to seeing you back on this end of the pond soon. Thanks, everybody.